Welcome to, I think it's the 29th video of Old Guys Gentlemen Flippers, and this will be kind of a discussion of the Yin Yang TLL90S level that's capable of having accuracies of 0.001 degrees. Comparing it a little bit to the Angle Cube, which I think offers 0.2 degrees accuracy, and a little bit about the KME system and what I did to it. But first, I need to talk a little bit about what my goals are when I sharpen a knife, and a little bit about the angles. So that'll be a little whiteboard discussion you can see here. Okay, but before I compare the different angle measurements in the KME system, I think I should do kind of a quick review of what I personally want to get out of my sharpening system. Kind of in this order, I want it to be sharp. I want it to be really sharp, shaving sharp. Having the ability to cut stupid phone book paper sharp. I want it to be fairly durable, which means I can't have really thin bevel grinds, and it also means I have to have pretty good steel, and most of my knives have got hardnesses in the ranges of 58 to 62. So the next important thing is it needs to look good for me. And what does that mean? It means I'll talk about this in a second, but I want the bevel, the thickness of the bevel, to be the shiny part, to be 2 to 4 millimeters wide, have a mirror finish, and even thickness along the blade. So, why are angles important? Well, this is just kind of a stupid diagram of a knife where theoretically you have a flat, although on a lot of knives today they don't have flats up at the top edge of the knife. Then there's the blade grind, and then there's the edge that's put on it, factory edge, the edge that I put on there. A lot of factory edges come in at 20 to 22 degrees, and that is this measurement right here, which is half of the total angle of the complete edge. So I've got 18 written down here, and that's mainly been my experience is that with 18 degrees I can get a pretty sharp edge. It's still pretty durable. It gives me 2 to 4 millimeters wide at the edge. I can do some nice mirror finishes, and I can do even thickness, although 18 degrees means less for the mirror and the thickness. So why are angles important? Well, the OCD in me wants to know that if I'm trying to get an 18-degree edge, that I have an 18-degree edge. That has really no value other than some of the stuff I mentioned here, other than that, because I could probably still have this and have this be 18.5 degrees, 19.5, maybe even close to 20 degrees, and still get this kind of stuff. But my goal has been to get 18 degrees. So how do you measure something like that? Well, on the KME, they have markers on there, but they don't mean a whole lot because, you know, let's say this is the sharpening stone. You put this on a fixed angle, and if you move this thing back and forth, it's going to change the actual angle that's ground on there. So that's where an angle measuring device comes into play. So what I've resorted to using are these angle measurement devices. Now, why is it so important to get the same angle again and again and again? Well, let me go back a little bit more on something else. To use the angle devices, you have to be able to establish what this center line is, because that's going to be your 0-degree angle. And you take your angle devices and you set it up on something that you know will be parallel with this center line. If you have nice flats and you know that your KME given that, let's say you had a bar of metal in the KME and it's measuring 0 degrees and you get a good reference off of that, then if you zero set your angle measurement here and then move the adjustment to the point where it reads 18 degrees, you know you're 18 degrees off that zero set point. And I can better explain some of that when you actually see the model. But why is it kind of important to get a repeatable 18 degrees? Well, here's why. If there's any variations in different things where you can't be sure you're getting 18 degrees, let's say you get 19 degrees. Now I'm going to exaggerate here, but if this is 18 degrees and let's say this is 19 degrees, and if you're sharpening, what you're going to be doing is mainly only touching the metal down in this portion of the edge, and you'll still be getting a sharpness because you'll be creating that the burr, but you'll be not doing much work on this or kind of working it down like that, which is not good. If you put it up there and you think you got 18 but something's off somewhere, so you really have 17, well then what you've got is, if that's 18 then this is like 17. So now all you're really doing is you're sharpening this portion of the edge, and it's not going to do anything for your point until you actually wear down that metal till you get down to this point. And I'm exaggerating here, you know, because I really don't know on degree changes, you know, how much of this edge is being touched and not being touched. But I know it's not going to be perfect, because what you like to do is every time come down here and lay this flat on here, and you're always doing the full surface. That's ideal, and you're never going to get that exactly. But in my opinion, if you can get it within, let's say, 0.1 degrees or so, that that little bit of variation can work itself out by basically pushing through the metal till you're fully flat again. The other thing is that when you flip your knife around to do the other side, in order to make sure you're getting kind of even bevels, you're going to need to make sure that the flat is, the center line is still level and center line like it was before, and that you still have 18 degrees, because otherwise you may end up grinding this side at 18 degrees and this side at 19 or 17 degrees. So that's why it's kind of important to see if you can get pretty close to the angle that you're trying to get for. That absolute value is not that important, but being able to repeat it for each stone, because as you put different stones in, they're different thicknesses, and it changes the angle. And there is a thickness compensator, which probably takes away most of the error, but if you can get some confidence in angle measurement, then you should be able to get to within 1/10 or maybe 2/10 of a degree of where you were before, and that should be good enough. So I think that's enough for that, and let's get back to the hardware. Okay, so now I'm back downstairs in my sharpening area, and I should talk a little bit about the KME system. A caveat right up front, I gotta say, this thing without the vise comes with this handle, and sharpening with it on here is more than adequate to get you almost all the things that I listed in what I desire in a blade. But I never quite know what the angle is, because you really don't have a 0 degrees anywhere while you're holding this. So I did get the base, but then I started discovering all these little, it's not a lathe. On the base here, this thing rocks back and forth about 1 to 2 degrees. And so I did different things, like I put Teflon tape in there, I put some blue tack to just kind of solidify it, and that kind of worked for a while. But I was still getting some deviations, and what I used was the angle cube. And so if you can imagine this on here, put that aside for a second, then talk about these mods here in a second. Then I would zero out the angle cube on this, so it didn't matter if this was level or not. And then theoretically, that trueness would go all the way through to this point here, so that the center line of the blade was level with this, and that's set to 0, so you should be good to go. And you measure this, adjust to the degrees you want, and then you're good to go. But the problem I had is that this shifts around, and so depending on what I was doing, the degrees would change a little bit. So the next thing I did is I took it out. Somebody suggested putting out I came up with the idea of putting in a vise. And this is overkill in the vise, but it's the cheapest one that Orchard Hardware sold. And this is pretty much parallel with this plane, so if I got a 0 set on the level indicator here, this should be 0 as well, and I kind of verified that. So then I put this flush with this, and that was not quite adequate, I think, because I don't have a flat, I don't know what you call this thing, but it's made for gripping things and holding them, and I could probably get different blocks, but I don't have them. And I tried to keep adjusting this until I got it close to where I could read, if it's 0 here, that it's also 0 here. I never quite got there. And there's a few things that I found that kind of contribute to that, because I need to be able to read it. Here is 0, here is 0, here is 0, here is 0, and sometimes I would get it fairly close here and here, but then I'd flip it over and it'd be off over here. And so I started wondering what's causing that. And I found out there's a little bit of slop in here. And again, I'm using this in a way that the guys at KME, they didn't design it for what I'm using it for. I'm just trying to see if I can make it bend to my law of what I'm looking for. Because there's a little bit of slop in here, which I've kind of fixed with some Teflon tape. There's a little bit of slop where this piece fits into a hole here. There's a little bit of variation back here as this pullback plate is pulling on these things. There's variations in how far away this thing that grabs the jaw is between here and up there. So there's all these little variations. So even though I can measure with some confidence down to a few tenths of a degree, this thing is never going to be able to give me 0, 0, 0, 0. So that when I put a blade in, and this one is nice, it has flats on either side, that the 0 set point here is the same as the 0 set point on here, and so if I go 18 degrees off of that, I'm going to get an 18 degree edge. So what do I do with that? What I decided to do is to almost arbitrarily pick a procedure and stick with it. So let's undo this. So one thing I'll do is normally I'll tape this to protect it, Then I'll draw a line directly from the tip to this edge here, and then I'd figure the halfway point between that establishes the angle of the jaw, and then I determine like a halfway point between these two, which might be about right here, and that would be the center point. And I line that center point up here, and we'll do this without tape right now. So this is going to be in parallel with that line from here to there, and then this should be lining up with the midpoint wherever that is. And it all needs to be extended out far enough so that I can get 18 degrees without shaving aluminum off of this thing, as you've seen I've done and other people have done. So let's just say that's it. So what I do then, a couple of other things about the mods. People have done this in various different ways. I took a black rubber cork that I actually use with my bagpipe sometimes, and I just sliced it up, drilled a little hole through it, and did it a few different times. And this is the stop for making sure you don't go off the end here. You know, I probably shouldn't have the water stone in there while I'm doing this. Bad old guy. It's just arbitrary diamond stone. You know, there's also a little bit of play here. I haven't checked the variation on that, but I think I'm convinced right now is I shouldn't sweat too much about the variations. So I make sure that this thing is kind of centered on the jaw and about halfway up the blade. And I'll come here and I'm probably not going to rebalance this thing. Well, I probably should. What the hell? So it's within 1/1000th. And I put up here, it's a magnetic mount. And I don't know how well you can see the number. It's reading 18.803. So I go down to the point where I just need to kind of get close to 18. Because I've kind of arbitrarily, semi-arbitrarily said, as long as I'm within 50 thousandths of a degree. I do this much faster when I'm not on camera. So that's 18.009 degrees. And then I'll go ahead and I'll do the sharpening. But now, because I know there's a variation when I flip it over, and it has something to do with the structure of all of this, I basically remeasure it and do the same thing. So for instance, I double check the flat because I've probably moved stuff around. And then put it on here. So I'd said 18 before, and now it's 17.5. So there's a half a degree difference just by rotating it. And I've just about given up trying to figure out why that is. And I saw this by using the cube as well. Sorry, the lighting's not so good, so I'm fiddling with this. And you're not seeing what's going on. I'm about 18.24, 18.04. Okay, it's 17 point. Let's see what the problem is. It's me. Okay, so that's 18.03. Looks like it's coming down still. And then I'd sharpen it there. So I think what I'm doing is, in a system that has little variations and changes, I'm always coming back to the same reference point and zeroing it out. And regardless of how this is set up, I'm always putting 18 degrees on there. And it seems like I'm getting really sharp edges that are durable, and yeah, nice even 2 to 4 millimeter bevel and a mirror finish. This angle cube is much cheaper. Could I get the same thing with it? I think yes. I think I get a little bit more resolution here and a little bit higher confidence that I'm going to be at the same angle. But given all the other variations that I have no control over, really, I don't know how really true that is. It just makes me feel a little bit more confident for the extra, whatever it was I spent on that stupid thing. The other downside of this is it's a little bit longer, which makes it a little bit more cumbersome. The magnet isn't quite as good. At some point, I may try one of the other sharpening systems if I can find one that has a little bit less play involved. But I should keep bringing reality into this thing that I'm probably not going to see a difference in the blade. I mean, if I'm sharpening one side of the blade at 18 degrees and the other side of the blade at 19 degrees, I might see a little bit of a difference in the bevel angle. I probably won't see any difference in the sharpness or durability, and so it probably gets into it just doesn't matter. Except if you have the budget, it is kind of cool to see this fineness here, and I will keep experimenting with this system or maybe some other systems to see if I can get some better reliability. But also, having said that, one other kind of side note is this take this out. Of all my knives, this is probably one of the only ones that has a nice flat. I called this the Chunk Master before. It's a Ferrum Forge. What's it called? Scepter. It's becoming one of my favorite knives. I don't know why. But more typically, there'll be a tiny little flat like in the 0450. You can grab a hold of that, but it just makes it a little bit more wobbly in this and adds more variation. It seems like more and more, like on this Liang Ma Warrior 1 version 2, looks like a flat, but it's not a flat. It's a bevel, and so there's no flat on this thing. And so what you have to do is you have to kind of make up for that by layering tape or using double back tape or some double back tape here that has some squishiness to it. So you squeeze down and you're squeezing mostly on the ridge here, but somewhat stabilized on either side because of the squishiness of your material. But all of that will make a variation in that center line that you're depending on to get an accurate angle measurement. So I think that's it for this discussion. I probably added a lot more questions than answers. If you got the budget, this is a fun thing to have. You can probably do it just as well with this, or not at all, and just do it with a Sharpie with this thing mounted in a handle. I'm sure there's guys out there who do it this way, and the blades look just as good or much better than mine. So If you saw any assumptions that I made here that are just way off base, I'd appreciate hearing from you. If you have any suggestions for doing stuff differently, I'd love to hear from you. And I think that's enough rambling for today. Thank you for watching.